Why did the room always seem colder when the laughter was directed at her? Private leaned against a crate, his grin wide, his finger jabbing toward her arm. "Hey, Sarge, what happened? Fall off a forklift?" The others chuckled, some louder than others, all eager to join in. The scars on her skin became the punchline yet again. Alex Torres kept her hands steady, her face unreadable, her voice calm. She didn't flinch, didn't respond, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her react. The scars had been with her long enough to know this pattern. People saw them, guessed, filled in their own stories. Training accident, mishap with equipment, maybe some careless mistake, and laughter was easier than silence. She stacked another box on the pallet, checked the manifest, signed her initials. Each movement was precise, practiced. The work was mechanical, but her thoughts weren't. They moved quietly like shadows slipping under doors. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that in exactly 1 hour, a two-star general would step through that same door and change everything. Because scars weren't just scars, and call signs weren't given, they were earned. Staff Sergeant Torres stood than the others, but not because she wanted to show strength. It was habit. Years of carrying weight, physical, mental, moral, had carved posture into her bones. At Fort, she was just another logistics sergeant. MOS 92, a supply chain, inventory control, filing the paperwork no one else wanted to touch. She was invisible in plain sight, the kind of soldier who kept the gears turning without ever being noticed. But her scars were louder than she was. The largest one ran like a pale river from her left elbow down to her wrist. Jagged, uneven, a reminder not of clumsiness but of Kandahar, that compound, that siege, that day when an IED ripped through the world and shrapnel found her flesh while she dragged a bleeding team leader to safety. The smaller punctures on her right shoulder. Mosul, 8 hours on a rooftop, surrounded, firing until her weapon felt like it had fused to her hands. The burns, Syria, a chemical weapons site that had caught fire while her team scrambled for evidence before the 90 minutes. That's all they had been given. 90 minutes between life, death, and erasure. Each scar was a story, a chapter never written in official records, sealed in classified reports. And together, they whispered one word. Reaper. Not because she had the highest kill count, though she did. Not because she was the sharpest shot in Delta Force, though she was. But because when her name appeared on an assignment when Reaper was deployed, the mission closed. Always. Targets didn't escape. Teams didn't vanish. Success wasn't optional. Until the last one, the one that ended it all. Torres. Her thoughts snapped back. Lieutenant Wilson's voice cut through the air, sharp as a blade. She turned, her face calm, steady. Yes, sir. These supplies need to be ready by noon. General, coming through for a surprise inspection. Yes, sir, everything will be ready. Her tone was even, almost casual, like she'd heard it all before. And she had. She had stood in rooms where generals barked orders, where Pentagon officials outlined missions so sensitive they didn't officially exist. She had briefed men who wore stars on their collars and shadows in their eyes. But that was before the explosion, before the shattered leg, before the nerve damage in her arm, before the medical board declared her unfit for special operations. Most would have taken retirement, full pension, VA benefits, civilian life, but she wasn't most. She chose reclassification, a quieter job, a smaller title, a different uniform of responsibility, supply, logistics, counting bolts and crates instead of bodies and bullets. And so here she was, invisible, disposable, a ghost of who she had been. At least that's how they saw her. Look at her, muttered to Martinez, his voice barely low enough. She doesn't even seem worried, like she deals with generals every day. Martinez smirked. Supply clerk mentality, this stuff doesn't touch them. They've never seen real military action. If only they knew. Alex checked the manifest again, her voice firm when she spoke. "Private Martinez, move these crates to Building B carefully. They contain sensitive equipment." "Sensitive?" Martinez laughed, glancing at. "Sarge, these are just basic supplies. How sensitive could they be?" She paused. For the first time her eyes locked on his. The flicker was brief, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of something colder, something lethal. "Every piece of equipment in this depot keeps soldiers alive," she said. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried. "Every bolt, every circuit, every wire. They're the difference between someone coming home or not. Remember that." The private's grin faltered. Something in her tone reached deeper than rank. For a split second he wasn't looking at a supply sergeant. He was looking at someone who had seen too much. Someone who had held dying friends because a radio jammed or a weapon failed. Someone who understood that logistics wasn't a joke, it was lifeblood. Martinez swallowed his reply, lifted the crates and carried them away. At lunch the laughter returned. "There's something weird about Torres," said. "Those scars, the way she talks, like she's hiding something." "Training accident," Martinez guessed, though his voice lacked conviction now. "She got hurt, washed out of whatever she was before." They had no idea how close they were, yet how far, because the truth was buried deeper than their imaginations could dig. Alex Torres had been Reaper. 3 years, 27 operations, a bounty on her head in more than one country. She had been the answer to problems that couldn't be solved by policy, by diplomacy, by conventional force. And then the explosion. The one that shattered bone, burned nerve endings, silenced a career. The board had been clear. Nerve damage disqualified her. She could retire, take honors, fade quietly. But she had refused. She chose instead to disappear into a role no one cared about. A cover, a shield, a way to stay close to the uniform without drawing attention. She had thought the silence would protect her. But silence had a way of echoing when you least expected it. That afternoon, while checking shipments, she noticed something wrong. 3 crates of radio equipment, missing encryption modules, the kind of theft that most clerks would chalk up to error, file a report, wait months for replacements. But Alex wasn't most clerks. Her hand froze on the empty slot. Memories slammed into her. Kandahar, Operation Silent Thunder, 48 hours without comms because enemy forces had stolen modules exactly like these. Her team surrounded, cut off, bleeding, whispering his daughter's name as he died in her arms. The scars on her arm burned. This wasn't random. Someone had stolen them, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And someone who might be watching her. "Everything okay with that shipment?" Lieutenant Wilson asked, clipboard in hand. She forced her face calm. "Just double-checking the manifest, sir." "What kind of discrepancies?" For a heartbeat she thought of telling him everything, but old instincts locked her tongue. "I'll have a report ready by tomorrow, sir." He nodded and walked away. She waited until the depot was empty. Then she pulled out a phone most soldiers didn't know existed, a number that wasn't in any directory. She dialed, the line clicked. "This is Reaper," she said. Silence, then a voice she hadn't heard in 3 years. "General." "Alex, I thought you were dead, retired playing clerk." Her voice was steel. "Encryption modules, Henderson shipment, same specs as Silent Thunder." Another pause. He didn't need reminding what that meant. "How sure are you?" Sure enough to break 3 years of silence. He exhaled slowly. "I'll be there tomorrow, and Alex, stay sharp. If you're right, someone's been watching you longer than you think." The line went dead. Alex sat in the quiet depot, crates stacked like sentinels around her. Her hands were steady, but inside the old weight returned. The weight of responsibility, of knowing some wars never end and some soldiers never get to go home. The next day, black SUVs rolled through Fort's gates, 2 stars gleaming on the flag of the lead vehicle. The base stirred, whispers spread. Surprise inspection, General himself. Inside the depot, soldiers scrambled, nervous, papers shuffled, boots clattered. Alex stood where she always stood, calm, quiet, almost invisible. But once eyes scanned the room and landed on her, they didn't move on. "Sergeant Torres," he said. Every head turned. Alex's breath caught in her throat. There was no way he should know her name. "Yes, sir," she answered, crisp, professional. He walked closer, his gaze steady, and then he said it. "No confusion, Reaper." The word hit like a physical blow. Around her silence fell, froze, Martinez's mouth hung open. Wilson blinked in shock. Reaper. Why was a two-star general calling their quiet supply sergeant by a code name? Alex stood motionless, her scars burning under the weight of a name she hadn't heard in years. And for the first time, the laughter was gone. Why had the air gone so still? The depot, moments earlier filled with shuffling papers, nervous chatter, and boots on concrete, had fallen into a silence that felt like a vacuum. You could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the distant sound of a forklift outside, but inside nothing. Because one word had cut through it all. Reaper. Alex felt it settle into the room like smoke. A call sign not meant to be spoken aloud in places like this. A word that carried weight, history, ghosts. And now, every pair of eyes in the building was on her. Private Smirk had died in an instant. Martinez's arms hung slack at his sides. Even Lieutenant Wilson, usually quick to assert control, stood frozen. General didn't look away. His expression wasn't a commander's mask, not today. His eyes carried recognition, respect, and something else, something heavier, as though he had waited years for this very moment. Alex's body moved automatically into parade rest, her shoulders square, her voice steady even as her pulse quickened. "Sir, I think there may be some confusion." Shook his head. No confusion. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object that caught the overhead light. A coin, not ordinary currency but a challenge coin. Delta Force insignia etched into one side. On the reverse, a single word. Reaper. He held it out toward her, not like a question, but like a truth that couldn't be erased. "This belonged to someone else too?" asked quietly. The silence deepened. Mouth opened, closed again. Martinez's jaw clenched. The young soldiers, so quick to mock, now looked at her with something else entirely. Fear, awe, shame. Alex's throat tightened. That coin was real. Too real. It had been pressed into her hand after a mission that didn't officially exist. It was proof that her past wasn't just stories whispered in classified briefings. It was proof that she had been there. "Sir," she said carefully, "this information is classified. It shouldn't be discussed in this setting." Studied her, then gave a slow nod. "You're right. But as of this morning, those classifications have been lifted, and I came here to give you something that should have been awarded 3 years ago." His aide stepped forward, a small presentation case in hand, opened it. Bronze gleamed in the fluorescent light. "For extraordinary heroism in combat operations, for valor above and beyond the call of duty, for actions that saved the lives of 12 American service members. Staff Sergeant Alex Torres, I present you with the Bronze Star Medal." The words seemed to echo against the depot's steel walls. The soldiers didn't move, they didn't blink. Because a Bronze Star wasn't given out for filing paperwork. It wasn't handed to supply clerks for neat inventories. It was carved out of blood, fire, sacrifice. Alex accepted the case with steady hands, though inside, her chest felt like it was splitting. 3 years she had hidden. 3 years she had swallowed who she used to be. 3 years she had lived in quiet exile. And now it was laid bare. His voice carried on. "Furthermore, I am authorized to offer you reinstatement to your previous rank and assignment. Master Sergeant Torres, will you consider returning to Special Operations Command?" The words struck harder than the metal. Master Sergeant. The young soldiers gasped. Staff Sergeant had been her official title, but Master Sergeant, that was a world apart. Years of responsibility, leadership, experience. The rank alone revealed a truth no one here had ever imagined. Looked like the floor might give way beneath him. Martinez gripped the edge of a crate like it was the only solid thing in the room. Wilson's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering on the concrete, ignored. Alex looked down at the metal, then up at, then around at the faces staring at her. Children, she thought, barely out of basic, full of bravado, quick to laugh at scars they couldn't comprehend. They had no idea how heavy those scars were, no idea what had been traded for each one. "Sir," she said slowly, her voice quiet but firm, "I appreciate the offer, but I'd like to remain in my current assignment." The words stunned the room more than the reveal itself. Blinked, caught off guard. "May I ask why?" Alex's eyes moved across the faces in the depot. Martinez, Wilson, the others, young soldiers looking at her as though she had stepped out of myth. "Because there's work to do here," she said. "These soldiers need to understand what service really means, and maybe I can teach them something." For the first time since entering, smiled, a faint curve of respect. Suddenly found himself unable to stay still. He stepped forward, his face red, his voice stumbling. "Sergeant, I mean Master Sergeant, we didn't know. We." "Private," Alex said calmly, cutting through his stammer. "Come here." He moved like a man walking toward judgment. Alex rolled up her sleeve, exposing the jagged scar that ran from elbow to wrist. The one no joke could ever do justice to. "Do you see this?" she asked. Nodded quickly, swallowing hard. "Yes, ma'am." "This doesn't remind me of victory," she said quietly. "It reminds me of failure, of the people I couldn't save." Her finger traced the line. Her voice didn't waver, though inside memory pulled at her like gravity. "This scar came from Kandahar, trying to save Sergeant First Class Timothy. He was 22, married. His wife was pregnant. I couldn't save him, but I saved 11 others that day." The depot was so silent that every word carried to every corner. Eyes burned with tears he tried to hide. Martinez shifted, his throat tight. Even Wilson's gaze dropped, shame flickering across his features. Alex lowered her sleeve, her voice steady but soft. "Military service isn't about being tough. It's about being willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself, to protect the person next to you, even if it costs you everything." Martinez stepped forward, his own voice shaking. "Master Sergeant, we're so sorry. We didn't know." "You didn't need to know my history to treat me with respect," Alex said. "You should treat every soldier with respect, regardless of their scars, their job, or their past." Her eyes swept across the room. Every person in this uniform has a story. Every scar has a reason. Every quiet face might be carrying something you can't imagine. Wilson finally found his voice. "Master Sergeant Torres, on behalf of this unit, I apologize." "No apologies necessary, Lieutenant," Alex interrupted gently. "But maybe this can be a lesson." His gaze lingered on her, pride evident. "This is why you were the best operator I ever worked with," he said quietly. "Not because of your combat skills, though they were exceptional, but because you never forgot what the mission was really about." The young soldiers stood in silence, their world reframed. Alex held the metal case, but her eyes weren't on the bronze. They were on the faces before her, on the shame, the awe, the sudden understanding. Her scars had finally spoken. And no one was laughing anymore. Why did respect feel so heavy when it came too late? The days after General's visit changed everything at Fort. Whispers ran through the base like electricity, but not the kind of gossip that twisted stories into exaggeration. This time, the whispers carried weight. They carried reverence. The quiet supply sergeant with scars on her arms was no longer just a name on the duty roster. She was Reaper. Was the first to act different. He showed up early the very next morning, awkwardly clearing his throat, offering to help with inventory. Martinez wasn't far behind. They trailed her through the depot like shadows, asking questions they wouldn't have dared a week ago. Sergeant began one afternoon, then caught himself. I mean, Master Sergeant. Just Sergeant Tours, she interrupted gently, sliding a clipboard across the table. The rank doesn't matter here. What matters is that this checklist gets finished before 1600. But the title hung in the air, even when she tried to strip it away. To them, she would never again just be a supply sergeant. And she knew the danger of that. Respect was one thing, myth was another. She didn't want to be a story, she wanted to be useful. During lunch, finally found the courage to ask the question burning inside him. Why didn't you tell anyone? She didn't look up from the manifest she was reviewing. Tell anyone what? Who you are, what you've done. You just let everyone think, he hesitated. You let us laugh at you. Her pen paused. For a long moment she didn't move, didn't speak. Then she set the clipboard down and met his eyes. Because I don't need your opinion to know who I am. Blinked. She leaned closer, her voice lower, steadier. If you ever need external validation to know your own worth, you'll break the first time someone questions you. That's not strength. Strength is knowing who you are even when the world misjudges you. Swallowed hard. The words lodged in his chest, heavier than any lecture he'd ever heard. Martinez, quieter, asked the question his friend wouldn't. But don't the scars hurt, physically? Alex looked down at her arms. She flexed her fingers, tracing the memory of old wounds. Every day, but they remind me that I survived, and that I still have work to do. What kind of work? Asked. Her lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. Training you. From that day forward, the depot wasn't just a workplace. It became a classroom. She taught them things manuals never mentioned. How to think of every crate not as an object, but as a lifeline. How to trace the path of a single radio component from shelf to battlefield, and understand what its absence might cost. She held up a piece of equipment one afternoon, a small encryption unit. This doesn't look like much, she said. But to a soldier pinned down, it's the difference between calling for backup and dying unheard. Martinez turned the device in his hands, suddenly reverent. His grin was gone. Neither of them would ever look at inventory the same way again. But even as she poured herself into teaching, shadows returned. Because the missing encryption modules weren't a paperwork glitch. They weren't misfiled, misplaced, or stolen for resale. They were targeted, and Alex knew what that meant. It meant someone had a plan. Late one night, long after the depot was locked and the soldiers had gone back to their barracks, Alex sat alone at her desk. The glow of a single lamp illuminated the manifest she had spread before her. She traced serial numbers, cross-referenced dates, noted discrepancies. Patterns emerged, not random, not sloppy, deliberate. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The memories of Kandahar flooded in unbidden. Blood on her hands, the radio silence. The 16 hours of holding ground alone, firing until her arms were numb. Her scars pulsed like they remembered too. She picked up her phone. The number she had used before still sat at the top of a secure list. Her thumb hovered over it, but she didn't press. Not yet. Because a thought kept circling back, relentless. What if the missing modules weren't just stolen? What if someone wanted her to find out? The next morning's words still echoed in her mind. Stay sharp. Someone been watching you longer than you think. It wasn't paranoia if it was true. And deep down she knew. She wasn't invisible anymore. The depot wasn't the same for the young soldiers either. Stopped cracking jokes. Martinez stopped rolling his eyes. They started arriving early, staying late, asking questions like sponges desperate to soak up whatever she offered. They were kids, really. 19, 20, faces smooth with youth, hearts full of conviction they didn't yet understand. She saw in them what she once had been, eager, unaware of how fragile life could be, how quickly it could break. And part of her wanted to protect that innocence. The other part knew she had to prepare them for the weight that would come crashing down someday. Every job in the military matters, she told them one evening as they crates. The cook, the mechanic, the medic, the supply specialist, we're all part of the same mission. To win wars, asked. No, she looked at him steadily, to bring everyone home. The words settled on them like stones. Later that night she found herself alone again, the depot dark, the silence pressing in. She opened the metal case had given her. Bronze gleamed against velvet. Her reflection shimmered faintly in its surface. She remembered the firefights, the screams, the weight of men heavier than herself as she dragged them through sand and blood. She remembered the moment the IED detonated, the force that tore through her, the fire that seared her nerves. She remembered waking in a field hospital, tubes in her arms, doctors explaining what she'd lost. And yet here she was, still serving, still standing, still haunted. Her phone buzzed on the desk, startling her. Unknown number, secure line. She hesitated, then answered. Reaper. The voice was low, distorted, one she hadn't heard in years. She froze. Did you think you could disappear forever? The voice asked. Her grip tightened. Who is this? Click. The line went dead. Alex sat motionless, the hum of the lamp the only sound in the room. Her scars burned again. The past wasn't just knocking at the door, it was already inside. Why did the voice sound so familiar? The call had lasted only seconds, but its echo lingered long after the line went dead. Alex Torres sat in the half-lit depot, her phone heavy in her hand, her chest tight. The voice hadn't given a name. It hadn't needed to. It had carried something she recognized, the cadence of someone who had been in the field, someone trained, someone who knew her. Did you think you could disappear forever? The words gnawed at her, not a threat, not exactly, more like a reminder, a warning. She stared at the rows of crates, each one stacked neatly, their labels precise, their order flawless. On the surface, the depot was controlled, predictable, but underneath pieces were missing. Encryption modules gone, patterns hidden in manifests, shadows in the system. And now, voices in the dark. Sleep didn't come that night. Her body had learned long ago how to function without it. She lay still, staring at the ceiling of her apartment off base, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional passing car. The silence between sounds was louder than all of it. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She couldn't ignore it anymore. At the depot, and Martinez noticed the shift immediately. Sarge, you okay? Asked, watching her eyes flick across the clipboard faster than usual. I'm fine. But her voice was clipped, her movements sharper, each action precise like a blade. Martinez frowned. You don't look fine. Alex stopped, pen poised above the page, and for the first time she considered telling them. Not everything, never everything, but enough to make them understand the stakes. Instead, she lowered her pen, looked at them both. Every piece of equipment you touch matters. Every number, every serial, every shipment. You think mistakes only happen on paper. They don't. Mistakes cost lives. Don't forget that. Her tone ended the conversation. But Martinez exchanged a glance with. Something was happening. Something they weren't being told. That afternoon, Alex found herself in the motor pool, checking a manifest that should have been routine. But routine didn't exist anymore. She walked the line of vehicles, her eyes narrowing at a crate strapped to the back of a truck. The paperwork said it contained spare parts. The weight said otherwise. She tapped the crate with the butt of her pen. Hollow, wrong. Driver, she called. A young corporal jogged over, wiping his hands on his uniform. Yes, Sergeant. Where did this shipment come from? He glanced at his clipboard. Warehouse C checked out yesterday, paperwork cleared. Her jaw tightened. Warehouse C was outside her chain of control, but the paperwork carried her forged signature. Her heart slowed, her mind sharpening. Whoever had signed it knew her name, knew her handwriting, knew enough to slip something past the system. "Unload this crate," she ordered. The corporal hesitated, but now he obeyed, prying open the box. Inside wasn't spare parts, it was empty. Alex stared at the hollow container, her chest tightening. An empty crate passed through under her name. It wasn't just theft, it was bait. Someone was setting her up. That evening, she dialed the secure line again, answered on the second ring. "Alex." "Sir, it's worse than missing equipment. Someone's forging my signature. They're moving empty crates through supply, marked as sensitive cargo." His voice hardened. "Do you know who?" "Not yet, but it's someone with access." "Inside the base?" "Yes, sir." There was a long silence. Then, "Listen to me. Don't confront them directly. Whoever this is, they know your history. They're trying to draw you out. Let me send someone." "No," Alex cut him off. "The moment you send a team, they'll vanish. They're watching. They want to see if I bite." Exhaled slowly. "You're walking into a trap." "I've walked into worse." The line went quiet, and for a moment she thought he might argue. Instead, his voice dropped, heavy with something unspoken. "Stay alive, Reaper. That's an order." The line clicked dead. For the next week, the depot became a stage. Alex carried on as if nothing had changed, but her eyes missed nothing. Every signature, every serial, every crate was examined with a precision that bordered on obsession. And Martinez noticed. They didn't understand, but they saw the shift. And then it happened. During inventory, stumbled over a crate that hadn't been logged. Sarge, this one doesn't match the manifest." Alex crossed the floor in 2 strides. The label was clean, the paperwork flawless, but the weight wrong again. She ordered it opened. Inside wasn't equipment, it was shredded paper, useless filler. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't theft, it was substitution. Someone was swapping real shipments for fakes, and they were using her depot as the corridor. Looked pale. "What does it mean?" Alex didn't answer. Not yet, she couldn't. Because the truth was too dangerous. If encryption modules had already left the base, if sensitive equipment had already been replaced with junk, then somewhere, someone was preparing for something big. Something catastrophic. And worse, whoever it was, they wanted her involved. Her name forged, her depot used, her reputation twisted. It wasn't just a leak. It was a message. She was being pulled back into the shadows she thought she'd left behind. And this time, the battlefield wasn't half a world away. It was here. At Fort. That night, Alex sat alone again, the Bronze Star case open on her desk. The coin had shown her lying beside it. The scars on her arms burned, each one whispering memories she'd tried to bury. She thought of the young faces in the depot. Martinez, the others. Kids who thought war was something distant, something cinematic, something survivable. They had no idea it could reach them here. Her reflection stared back at her from the metal's surface. Not the supply sergeant, not the master sergeant, not even Reaper. Something in between. She closed the case with a snap. If someone wanted her drawn out, then so be it. But they'd learned the same thing enemies had learned in Kandahar, Mosul, and Syria. You don't call out the Reaper unless you're ready to face her. Why did betrayal always smell the same, like paper, ink, and silence? The depot looked unchanged. Crates stacked neat, paperwork filed, soldiers moving in routine rhythm. But Alex Torres knew better. Order was an illusion. Beneath it, something corrosive was spreading. Someone was using her depot as a corridor, forging her name, slipping hollow crates through, replacing sensitive equipment with filler. The theft wasn't sloppy, it was surgical, and it was happening under her nose. The worst part wasn't the stolen equipment. It was the signature, her signature. Every fake document bore her name in perfect imitation. Someone wasn't just stealing, they were framing her. And she couldn't tell anyone. Not Wilson, not the base commander, not even yet. Because if she moved too soon, the enemy would scatter, leaving nothing but suspicion directed at her. For the first time in years, Alex felt the familiar isolation of the field, the sense that no one around her could be trusted. Notice the shift. He caught her staring at a manifest longer than usual, her brow furrowed, her hand tightening around the clipboard. "Sarge," he asked quietly. Her head snapped up. "What is it, private?" He hesitated. "You look different, like you're not here." Her lips pressed into a line. He wasn't wrong. She wasn't here. She was somewhere else, rooftops in Mosul, compounds in Kandahar, firelit nights in Syria. She shook the thought away. Focus on your task. But when he turned back to the crates, she could feel his eyes flicking toward her again, watching, trying to piece together the puzzle. That night, Alex drove the perimeter roads of Fort instead of going home. Headlights carving through pine shadows, tires crunching on gravel. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found it. Warehouse C. The building was supposed to be locked, its contents logged, its doors sealed after hours. But as she slowed her vehicle, she saw it, the faintest sliver of light leaking from under the door. Her pulse slowed. She parked a block away, moving on foot. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional rustle of branches in the wind. She reached the door, crouched low, listening. Voices inside, muffled, indistinct. She couldn't make out words, but she caught rhythm. The cadence of military speech, precise, coded. She slipped back into the shadows, muscles taut. She could burst in. She could catch them in the act, but instinct screamed no, not yet. Patience. She moved back to her vehicle and drove away, but her mind stayed in that warehouse, turning over the possibilities. If it was inside the base, it wasn't just soldiers. It could be contractors, civilians, anyone with clearance. And worse, the voice on the phone echoed again in her mind. Someone who had once worn the same boots she had. Someone who knew her well enough to rattle her. Which meant this wasn't theft for profit, it was personal. The next morning, Lieutenant Wilson stood in the depot, clipboard in hand, trying to mask his nerves. "General has scheduled another follow-up inspection in 2 weeks. I want everything spotless. No errors, no excuses." "Yes, sir," Alex replied, her tone calm. But Wilson's eyes lingered on her longer than usual. And Alex caught it, a flicker, suspicion, curiosity, or something deeper. Her chest tightened. Could it be him? She dismissed the thought, too easy. But in her line of work, easy answers often hid the real ones. Over the following days, and Martinez became her shadow. They asked questions she didn't answer. They watched her when she thought they were. They knew something was wrong, even if they couldn't name it. One evening, Martinez finally broke. "Sarge, we're not blind. Something's happening. You've been different, secretive. We see it." Alex set down the wrench she was using to seal a crate. For a moment, she weighed silence. But silence would leave them vulnerable, and she couldn't stand the thought of these kids being the way she had once been. "Listen to me," she said finally, her voice low. "There are things going on here you don't understand, things I can't explain yet. But you need to be sharper. Pay attention. If you see anything out of place, anything, you tell me. Directly, no one else." Swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Martinez nodded. "But are we in danger?" Alex's eyes lingered on their young faces. Innocent, eager, untested. She wanted to tell them no, to let them hold onto their safety a little longer. Instead, she told them the truth. Everyone in danger, always. The question is whether you see it coming. The words landed like stones. That night, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered, then she answered. "Reaper," the same distorted voice said. Her grip tightened. "What do you want?" A pause, then. You don't belong in that depot, you never did. Her pulse slowed. Who are you? The voice chuckled, low and hollow. You already know, we served the same war, but only one of us was allowed to disappear quietly. The line crackled, then silence. Alex sat frozen, phone against her ear, the words sinking like ice. It wasn't random. It wasn't just inside the base. It was someone from her past. Someone who knew Reaper. 2 days later, during routine checks, Alex caught staring at her scars again, not with mockery this time, but with questions he couldn't form into words. She rolled down her sleeve. Don't waste time wondering about what you can't change, Private. But he started. She cut him off. Focus on what you can control, that's how you survive. Her tone silenced him, but she saw the doubt in his eyes. He wanted answers, and sooner or later he might get them. But not yet. Because first, she had to find the traitor. And she had to do it before the stolen equipment vanished into a where it would cost lives. Her scars burned again, whispering their old reminder. She wasn't finished. Not yet. Why did the air in the depot suddenly feel unsafe? It was the same space. Concrete floors, steel beams, stacked crates lined with precision. Yet something invisible pressed against it now, like a storm about to break. Alex Torres could feel it in her bones. She had lived too long in shadows not to recognize the signs. The rhythm was off. Someone was watching. It started with the small things. Paperwork that should have gone through her desk appearing already signed. A crate logged as received that no one remembered unloading. A truck leaving early with no driver she recognized. Each detail small enough to ignore. Together, they painted a picture. The traitor wasn't just sloppy. They were confident, bold enough to risk leaving breadcrumbs because they believed no one would follow. But Alex was following. Every night she combed through manifests, tracing movements of equipment across the base. The pattern sharpened. The fake crates weren't random, they were all tied to communications gear, radios, encryption modules, signal boosters. Someone wasn't stealing weapons, they were stealing voices. And Alex knew exactly what that meant. Was the first to notice her change again. "Sarge," he said one morning, hovering near her desk, "you haven't slept, have you?" Her pen didn't stop moving. "I've slept enough." "You look like hell." Her eyes lifted, sharp enough to cut. "Careful, Private." He swallowed but didn't back down. "We're supposed to have your back, right? That's what you keep teaching us, so let us." Her jaw tightened. For a moment she almost said yes, almost admitted what was happening, almost let them into the shadows she carried. But then Martinez entered, arms full of gear, face bright with the kind of youth she wanted to protect. She set her pen down. "You want to help me, then do your job, inventory, accuracy, precision. That's how you have my back." He hesitated, then nodded, but the hurt in his eyes lingered. 2 nights later, the storm finally broke. Alex parked near Warehouse C again, her headlights dark, her body low as she approached. This time she wasn't just watching, she was ready. The door creaked open before she reached it. A man stepped out, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Civilian clothes, but the way he moved was military, controlled, practiced. She froze, half in shadow. His face caught a slice of moonlight. Recognition hit like a blow. Staff Sergeant Hale. She hadn't seen him in years. Afghanistan, Somalia, missions they'd never been allowed to talk about. He had been good, too good. Sharp shooter, quick thinker, the kind of man who never questioned orders. And now he was here, carrying stolen equipment in the dead of night. Her chest tightened, the distorted voice, the cadence, it all fit. "Hale," she whispered under her breath. As if he heard her, his head turned sharply, eyes scanning the darkness. For a moment she thought he saw her. Then he slipped into the night, duffel vanishing into the shadows. She exhaled, her breath ragged. It wasn't just betrayal. It was personal. The next morning called. You've confirmed an identity. Yes, Hale. Cursed softly. That explains a lot. He disappeared from Soch 2 years ago, went private, rumors of mercenary work. Now he's here. Alex's voice was steel. He's not working alone. He's using the depot as his cover. He's forging my name. He wants me tied to this. Silence on the line, then's voice grim. You can't handle this alone. I already am. Alex. Sir, if you send a team, he'll smell it, and he'll vanish. He knows how we work. He was one of us. Cy carried the weight of command. Then you have to be careful. He's baiting you for a reason. I know. She ended the call before he could argue further. Back at the depot, and Martinez cornered her. We saw you last night, Martinez blurted. Her blood ran cold. Saw me. You left base, late, Warehouse Road said. His voice wasn't accusing, just worried. What's going on? Alex's gaze hardened. You were following me. Shifted, embarrassed. We knew something was wrong. We wanted to make sure you were safe. For a moment, she wanted to yell, to order them out of her business, to remind them of the line between sergeant and private. But then she saw their faces. Young, earnest, loyal, faces that hadn't yet been broken by betrayal. She exhaled slowly. What you saw, forget it. Martinez frowned. We can't. Alex's eyes darkened. Then understand this. The less you know, the safer you are. And right now, safety is a luxury I don't have. The words landed like a wall. His mouth closed. Martinez nodded reluctantly. But the doubt remained in their eyes. And Alex knew. Sooner or later, the storm would pull them in too. That night, Alex sat alone again, metal case open on the desk, scars burning under the lamp's glow. She remembered Hale in Somalia, the way he laughed after missions, the way he trusted orders without question, the way he had once pulled her out of a firefight with a bullet graze across his own ribs. And now that same man was stealing, betraying, framing. What had broken him? Money, anger, or something deeper? She didn't know. But she knew this. Hale wasn't just stealing equipment. He was sending her a message. And sooner or later, he would step out of the shadows again. This time, waiting for her. And when he did, she would have to decide, was she still Reaper? Or was she something else now? Why did the betrayal always come, wearing a familiar face? Alex Torres couldn't shake the image of him. Hale stepping out of Warehouse C, duffel bag slung across his shoulder, his movements precise, his head snapping as if he sensed her eyes in the dark. He was more than a thief, he was baiting her. And she knew the trap was already closing. The first strike came quietly. 2 days later, reported crates missing from the depot. Not just encryption modules this time, ammunition, enough to supply a squad. Alex checked the paperwork. Perfect, every signature flawless, every serial accounted for. On paper, nothing was missing. But on the floor, 3 crates were gone. Her name stamped across the release forms. Wilson called her into his office. His expression was stiff, his tone clipped. Sergeant Torres, I've received inquiries about irregularities in supply logs. Your signature appears on multiple documents under review. Alex met his gaze evenly. They're forged. He raised a brow. That's a serious accusation. And so is accusing me of losing weapons, she said sharply. Wilson hesitated, then leaned back in his chair. I don't know what's going on, Torres, but something is. And if you're involved, he let the threat hang. Alex's eyes narrowed. If I were involved, Lieutenant, you wouldn't see paperwork at all. You'd see chaos. The silence stretched. Wilson looked away first. Alex walked out, her scars burning under her sleeves. They weren't just framing her anymore. They were tightening the noose. That night, the storm finally reached her soldiers. And Martinez were on late inventory when it happened. A crash at the far end of the depot. the sound of splintering wood. "Stay here," whispered, but Martinez followed as he crept toward the noise. At the corner of an aisle, they froze. Two men not in uniform, faces shadowed, one hauling a crate, the other keeping watch with a pistol tucked casually at his side. Martinez's breath caught, grabbed his sleeve. They should run, but fear rooted them in place. The man with the pistol turned. And in that split second, Alex was there. Her hand closed over his collar, yanking him back into cover. Her other hand shoved Martinez flat to the ground. "Stay down," she hissed. The men hadn't seen them. Not yet, but they would. Alex's pulse slowed, her mind shifting gears into a state she hadn't touched in years. The Reaper was awake again. She moved like shadow, silent, controlled. Her scars burned as if they remembered too. In 3 strides she was behind the armed man. Her hand clamped his wrist, twisting until the pistol dropped. Her elbow drove into his throat, silencing his cry. The other man spun, startled, but she was already on him. Her fist cracked into his jaw, her knee into his chest. He crumpled with a choked groan. The entire exchange lasted seconds. When she turned, and Martinez was staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Get up," she ordered. They scrambled to their feet, still shaking. What was that?" stammered. Alex's voice was steady, cold. "That was me keeping you alive. Now move." They dragged the unconscious men into the office, zip-tied their wrists with cable ties, gagged them with rags torn from supply cloth. Martinez's hands trembled as he tied the knots. They weren't just thieves, were they? No, Alex's eyes stayed on the door. They were Hale's men. Hale echoed. Alex finally looked at them, the weight in her gaze pinning them where they stood. "You wanted to know what I've been hiding. That's your answer. A man I once trusted. A man who knows how I operate. He's inside this base, and he's trying to take me down with him." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Martinez swallowed. "So what do we do?" Alex exhaled, her voice low. "You do nothing. You go back to barracks. You forget this happened." "Forget?" His voice cracked. "We just saw you take down 2 armed men in seconds. You expect us to forget that?" "Yes," Alex said firmly, "because if you don't, you'll end up on his list, and you don't want to be there." But even as she spoke, she saw it in their eyes. The truth was out. They couldn't unsee it, couldn't unknow it. And that meant they were already in danger. Later, after the soldiers were asleep in their bunks, Alex sat alone in the office, the captured men unconscious in the corner. She studied them in the dim light. Their clothes were civilian, but their boots, military issue. Old, worn, men who had once worn the uniform. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't just Hale, it was more. A network. Former soldiers turned mercenaries. Men who knew how the system worked and how to exploit it. The phone buzzed. She answered without hesitation. "Reaper." Hale's voice, calm, smooth, familiar. "You're faster than they said you'd be. My men didn't stand a chance." Her jaw tightened. "Stop hiding behind shadows, Hale, face me." A soft chuckle. "I'm not hiding, I'm building. You were always blind to the bigger picture." "What picture?" "The one where the system you serve collapses under its own weight. You think you're protecting them. You're just delaying the inevitable." Her grip whitened around the phone. "And stealing from soldiers helps that how?" "You don't understand." His tone sharpened. "These modules aren't just comms, they're keys, access. Once they're in the right hands, everything unravels." Her chest tightened. "Whose hands?" But the line went dead. She lowered the phone, her reflection staring back from the black screen. Hale wasn't just stealing. He was planning something larger, something that could shatter more than just Ford. And he had dragged her back into the game. Her scars pulsed, alive with old fire. If Hale wanted Reaper, then Reaper was coming. Why did endings always feel more like beginnings? The depot was quiet. too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed into the skin, making every sound sharper, every breath heavier. Alex Torres stood in the middle of the floor, scars burning under her sleeves, waiting. She knew Hale would come. The two men she'd captured were gone now, turned over quietly to people, whisked off base before their presence could raise alarms. Hadn't argued this time. He knew Hale was no longer speculation. He was inside. And tonight, Alex was done waiting. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps unhurried, confident, the sound of someone who knew the ground he walked on, who didn't fear what lay ahead. Then he stepped into view, Hale. His face was older, harder, but still familiar. A man carved by the same wars, carrying the same invisible weight. But his eyes, those were different. They carried a coldness she hadn't seen before. "Alex," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "Or should I say Reaper?" Her voice was steady. "You don't get to use that name." He smiled faintly. "Why not? You earned it. I admired it, still do. You're stealing from the same people we bled to protect." His expression darkened. "Protect? You still believe that? We were tools, Alex, disposable, used until broken, then discarded. Look at you. Scars, nerve damage. They threw you away, didn't they?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Hale stepped closer, his tone sharpening. "The difference is, I refused to be thrown away. I took control. And now I'm building something bigger. A network that answers to no one. Not generals, not politicians, not anyone." "And how many soldiers die while you build it?" Alex asked. He shrugged. "Collateral, sacrifices for a greater cause." Her eyes narrowed. "No, sacrifices for your ego." The silence between them thickened. Years of shared missions, trust, and survival now shattered in a single confrontation. Hale reached into his jacket, pulling out a small black device, an encryption module. "This," he said, holding it up, "is freedom. Once it's activated, once the right hands hold it, the old system crumbles. Communications collapse, control disappears, and men like us finally stop bleeding for nothing." Her voice was ice. "Men like us, you don't speak for me." For the first time, his smile faltered. The sound of boots echoed behind her. Martinez. They hadn't listened. They had followed her here, faces pale but determined. Hale's eyes flicked past her, landing on them. His smile returned. "Ah, students, watching the master at work." "Stay back," Alex ordered, her voice sharp. But it was too late. Hale had seen them. They were part of it now. "Interesting," Hale mused. "So this is why you stayed. Not because of loyalty, not because of duty, but because you needed someone to believe in you again." Her voice cut like a blade. "I don't need belief, I need responsibility." Hale's hand twitched near his side. And in that instant, Alex moved. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't cinematic. It was precise, efficient, born of muscle memory and scars that had taught her what hesitation cost. Her hand struck his wrist, knocking the module free. Her foot swept his stance, sending him off balance. Her arm locked around his throat, not with rage but with control. For a heartbeat, Hale's eyes met hers, and in them she saw not a villain, but a man broken differently. A man who had chosen anger where she had chosen endurance. He struggled, but her grip tightened. "Alex," he rasped. Her scars burned hot. Kandahar, Mosul, Syria, all of it flashing through her in fragments, the faces she had lost, the lives she had saved, the weight she carried. And for a moment, she thought about ending it here. But then she remembered, and Martinez behind her, watching, learning. She released him. Hale collapsed to the floor, gasping, his arrogance stripped. People stormed in seconds later, weapons raised, seizing him before he could recover. Alex stepped back, silent, her breathing steady. She had made her choice. She wasn't Reaper anymore. She was something else. Later, in the quiet aftermath, finally found his voice. "Why didn't you finish it?" Alex looked at him, her eyes steady, her voice soft. Because strength isn't about taking life. It's about knowing when not to. Martinez swallowed hard. But he betrayed you. He put all of us in danger. Her gaze lingered on them both. If you let betrayal turn you into what you hate, you've already lost. Remember that. They nodded slowly, the weight of her words pressing into them. Weeks later, the depot looked the same again. Crates stacked, manifests checked, boots scuffing the concrete, but nothing was truly the same. Word of Hale's capture spread quietly, buried under classified labels, but the story inside the depot lived on. And Martinez became her shadows again, not because of awe, but because of respect. Private Collins, fresh from training, once whispered a joke about her scars, silenced him with a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "You don't know what those scars mean," he said firmly, "but you'll learn." Alex had heard it. She hadn't needed to intervene. They were learning on their own now. The day her transfer orders arrived, she stood alone in the depot one last time. 3 years ago, she had come here broken, a ghost of Reaper, a shadow hiding in paperwork. Now she was leaving as something else, a teacher, a reminder, a living scar that taught others what service really meant. And Martinez shook her hand, their grips firm, their eyes wet. "We'll never forget what you taught us," said quietly. "You don't need to remember me," Alex replied. "Just remember the lesson." "What lesson?" Martinez asked. She looked at them both, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "That dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." As the convoy carried her away from Fort, Alex watched the depot fade in the distance. Her scars still ached, they always would, but now they weren't marks of failure. They were reminders, proof, credentials written in flesh that whispered to anyone willing to look closely enough. Not of death, but of survival, of responsibility, of quiet strength. Because real heroism isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need recognition. Sometimes real heroism just shows up every day, quiet, steady. And sometimes it wears the face of a soldier who chooses to serve in silence. Alex Torres understood that. She lived it. Every scar, every breath, every choice. And that was enough.